All right, and welcome in everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic, fantabulous, awesome freaking day. My name is Garrett Shumake, and you are listening to the Shumake Take, and welcome in to Predictions versus Reality. I'm sorry, I really wanted to do that. That kind of just, the thought just came in. I was like, all right, let's do it. But anyways, welcome in to Predictions versus Reality, the off-season series that I cover where I'm going to reflect on where I thought every team would finish and actually look at where they ended up. So for those of you that know what Predictions versus Reality is all about, make sure you guys hit the timestamp on the bottom where it officially begins. But if you do not know, Predictions versus Reality is a series where I look back at how each team did during their 2024 NFL season. But in August, I did a schedule prediction for every single team. And we're going to look back at where I thought they would be, where they ended up, and look at some metrics like their best wins, their offensive and defensive ranks. We'll look at some of the stat leaders from passing, rushing, receiving, tackles, sacks, and interceptions. And then we'll ultimately look at why I had them going the record that they were going, what went right or what went wrong, depending on the team, if they finished better or worse, of course. And then we're ultimately going to finish by talking about how this team can get better. And for this team today, if you notice by the shirt, we're going to be talking about the Detroit Lions, the NFC's number one seed in 2024. What a year the Lions had. This might have been this could have been the greatest year the Lions have ever had. They really could have. I know we'll talk about the ending, the divisional round here at the end of the show, but this year that the Detroit Lions had was unbelievable. I had them going 13-4. They finished 15-2. They managed to do even better than I thought they would, which is crazy to me. But they did it, and it happened. Their three best wins, in my opinion, were against Tennessee, 52-14, against Jacksonville, 52-6, and then beating Minnesota 31-9 in Week 18 in a battle for the NFC North and the number one seed, which they dominated in amazing fashion. Their offense ranked second in the NFL totally, which honestly, in my opinion, they were the best. And then defensively, they ranked 20th, which in my opinion is not really kind of like when I mentioned the Minnesota Vikings in the last video. If you haven't seen that, go ahead and check that out now. Or after this video, excuse me, sorry, don't cut this off now. go check out the Minnesota Vikings Predictions versus Reality after you're done watching this one. But a similar thing I said with their defense, the number really doesn't do it any justice from how good this defense actually was. But moving in to our stat leaders, Jared Goff passing 72% completion percentage, which I think was first in the NFL, top three at least. Then he threw for 4,629 yards, which was second, 37 passing touchdowns, which was fourth, and then threw for 12 interceptions. A lot of those coming in one game where he threw 5 against the Houston Texans in a game that they won. Believe it or not, was a very interesting stat. But Jared Goff had an incredible year. And the thing with Jared Goff is, yeah, he's a veteran quarterback, but he's another one of those examples where you give a guy time to really develop and learn, and he becomes a great quarterback. I mentioned this in the last PVR with Sam Darnold, with Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith. Jared Goff is not to the same degree, of course, because he was awful as a rookie, but then played really well in year 2. Year 3 went to a Super Bowl where they lost to the Patriots and was one of the worst games I think I've ever watched in my life. But after that, he kind of fell off, was a little, kind of shaky, then got shipped off to Detroit where everyone thought Jared Goff's career is over. You go to the Detroit Lions for your career to die. And not only did his career not die, he had probably the best year he's ever had as a quarterback, statistically meaning, and absolutely was one of the biggest driving forces behind the revival of this team and this organization. Jared Goff this year was absolutely phenomenal. He was clean, he was efficient, and when you look at top quarterbacks in the NFL, simply put, Jared Goff is up there right now. I know that people don't like to put him up there because of his talent and high-end ceiling, but looking at what he's able to do from an efficiency standpoint, execution standpoint, quarterbacking 101, he was one of the best in the NFL this year. There is no doubting that at all. Rushing, Jahmyr Gibbs, 250 carries, 1,412 yards, 16 touchdowns, which was tied for first, 5.6 yards per carry. Insane. That was third in the NFL. Add on 52 grabs for 517 yards and 4 receiving touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs, simply put, was, oh my God, he was so freaking good. He was so good. From week 1 to week 18, this dude hit the field running and simply did not stop. Oh my God. And when David Montgomery went down about a third of the year to go, some people thought, okay, his production is going to dip a little bit. No, his numbers got better. He got better being the number 1 lead back in Detroit, which is nuts. It's absolutely nuts. Not only did he have a great year with David Montgomery running alongside him, when Monty went down, Jahmyr Gibbs stepped up big time. He became a focal point of that offense more than he already was, and absolutely showed that he can put a team on his back. He put the team on his back in a lot of games this year because he's just that good. And I don't mean put the team on his back like he was carrying this team because everyone else was bad. No, everyone else was really good. But Jahmyr Gibbs definitely was a focal point of this offense, if not the biggest focal point of this offense. He had an incredible year. And then David Montgomery, 185 carries, 775 yards, 12 touchdowns, 4.2 yards per carry. Obviously, the numbers are not what people expected, but he did get hurt and went down, which is unfortunate. But when he was on the field, he was David Montgomery, as good as we know him to be. He simply was just he was still powerful. He was still explosive, right? Very good on the goal line. David Montgomery had a very good season despite the injury because he was on pace to hit 1,000 yards again. And quite frankly, that would have been awesome had he been healthy. And to see that happen again would have been awesome. Then receiving wise, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 115 grabs, second in the NFL, 1,263 yards, which was fifth, and then 12 receiving touchdowns, which was third. Amon-Ra St. Brown continuing to be one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, just a great guy, great hard worker, and he's one of those guys that you look at when you look at reliability. That is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Even in games where he wasn't, having a particularly good game and he was getting covered, right? He still went out there, did his work, did his job. And he's one of those examples where you work your butt off, your opportunities will come to you. There were so many games this year where in the fourth quarter, this guy went off, had big plays, and when it mattered, he was there. Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of the biggest models of consistency in the NFL. He doesn't have the big, explosive numbers per se, not compared to Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson. But Amon-Ra St. Brown is clean, as consistent, as reliable as they come for wide receivers, and one of the biggest draft steals in recent NFL history. And then first round pick on the opposite end of the spectrum, Jameson Williams, 58 catches, had 1,001 yards for the first time he cracked 1,000 yards in his career. So congratulations for the second-year man out of Alabama. And 7 receiving touchdowns. Jameson Williams, when they drafted him, was supposed to be that deep threat element that the Lions needed to complete this whole thing that they were building. And Jameson Williams really became that this year. Obviously, as a rookie, didn't do a whole lot. He had missed games from a suspension, I believe, or injury. I cannot remember. But came in this year, played really, really well, became a lot more consistent, and became that deep threat guy that the Lions really missed last year with him not really playing. So he came in, played really well, and added that element that they needed once again. I think I said that 3 times now. Oh my goodness. But anyways, then there was Sam Laporta, the second-year tight end out of Iowa, 60 catches, 726 yards, 7 touchdowns. Not the year that he had compared to year one, but Sam Laporta, he's a product of just everything else around him being great. Kind of like with the Minnesota Vikings, everyone was performing really well, so it was only a limited amount of touches to go around, and Sam Laporta really just didn't get that many compared to his rookie year. But at the same time, he was still a very reliable target. A solid security blanket, still made big plays over the middle, right? He was still a very good tight end. This is just like this conversation with Laporta is very similar to TJ Hawkinson, a top 10 tight end that even though their numbers were down this year, everyone else around them was performing really well, and he also garnered a lot of attention still if you look at the tape. He was still a threat and still a big factor in both these offenses' success for Hawkinson and Laporta, and that needs to be mentioned. That needs to be given credit because Sam Laporta is a really good tight end, and he showed why this year, despite the numbers being down. Tackle-wise, Jack Campbell finished with 131. Overall, Jack Campbell stepped up and had a really solid year. When Alex Anzalone went down, people thought that was going to be like over the middle of the field was going to be a little bit of an issue, and it was. To be fair, I'm not going to deny it, but at the same time, Jack Campbell really held the fort down as best as he could. He was a solid player. I know that people thought he was a reach in the first round, and I would still say, yeah, he's a reach because you don't really want to draft a linebacker in the first round, but he is still a solid player. He's still a good player, right? And so far, they're getting getting good value out of him, so I can't really complain. And then right there behind him, safety Brian Branch finished with 109. Brian Branch and his teammate Kirby Joseph, those two safeties on the back end, probably the best safety duo in the NFL. Brian Branch, a very good, solid tackler, clean, right? Then you have Kirby Joseph, who was the ball hawk. He finished with 9 interceptions, which led the league. He was a first-team All-Pro, and he deserved it. He had an absolutely incredible year. And then in the sack department, the team's leading sack guy was Aiden Hutchinson with 7.5, who went down early in the year. And now, as I was recording this, you see videos of him running and getting back into shape, and that's good to see. But Aiden Hutchinson, only playing in a handful of games and still being the team sack leader with 7.5, shows some concerns. Zadarius Smith, they got him in a midseason trade at the trade deadline, and he got 4.5 sacks. Those were the top 2 guys. No one else had more than 4. So it's interesting that Aiden Hutchinson finished first despite everything that happened, and it showed that was one of the biggest issues on this team was their pass rush. Even with Aiden Hutchinson being on the field, their pass rush, they were not getting enough juice from the rest of those guys. Aiden Hutchinson was kind of him, and that was it. And of course, even when you have Aiden Hutchinson, obviously, that's a good thing. He's obviously the number 1 pass rusher for the team for a reason. But when he went down, it showed that this team really did not have the juice to pick up the slack. And it allowed them to get picked on in the secondary from time to time. They couldn't get to the quarterback, so quarterbacks were a little bit more comfortable, right? And also, the big thing was the injuries, honestly, that really killed them in that spot. But overall, despite the injuries, I would say their defensive line as a unit overall for the whole year played pretty well. I thought Aaron Glenn did a really good job at getting those guys prepared, ready to go, and getting the most out of those guys. So I can't really complain too much. But I had them going 13-4 off of one word. If you go back and look at my predictions video I made in August, the one word I used was vengeance. Vengeance. When they lost in the NFC Championship, you could feel their pain, you could feel their anger, you could feel that they were going to come back even angrier than they already were when they lost. And they simply did not disappoint at all. And the things that went right and why I thought they would do well are exactly what happened. One of the things I mentioned was his offense stayed the same, and all these young guys are going into another year of development, and they're going to get better, and they got better. Jamison Williams, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs took steps forward. Jack Campbell, Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, all these guys on the defensive side stepped up as well. And the Lions are a great example of now, if you want to build a great roster, you have to build one through the draft. And with their first round picks, second round picks, third round picks, even day 3 picks, they were still able to get solid to elite, most of the time, great football players. And that's how you build a great team. That's how you build a great roster. And now the Detroit Lions are one of those teams that are one of the model organizations for how you build your roster, for how you should draft, right? So I can't express enough that the young players on this team getting better really made this team a lot better as well. And the other thing was coaching. You cannot talk about the Lions without their coaches and the job that they did. The way that the offense and Ben Johnson was able to get, all this production out of all these different guys and use them to their best of their abilities, to their talents, right? And then you look at on the defensive side with Aaron Glenn being able to get the most out of this defense despite the injuries, being able to field a unit that was still ultra competitive and had games like the Minnesota Vikings game in Week 18 where despite the things holding them back, they were still able to deliver in big time ways. In big time ways? No. They were a little bit that was a really bad stutter. Oh no, that was pretty bad. But either way, Aaron Glenn's ability to get this defense ready to go, their preparedness, right? It was incredible. It was absolutely incredible what these coaches were able to do. And you pair that with the players and how good they are, and you have a recipe for a 15-win football team. And the third thing that went right for them, despite the defensive struggles, I'm going to show a little bit more love on that side of the ball, they were the best in the NFL on third down. And when you think about it, no matter what happens on first and second down, if you can get to third down and have those opportunities to get off the field and you get offenses off the field, it doesn't really matter about the injuries. It doesn't matter about, right? It doesn't matter like if your secondary is not that good or you have issues in the defensive line. Like none of that stuff really matters if you know how to step up and get off the field when you need to get off the field. And that really gave their defense a boost, gave them a lot of help, right? Being able to step up when it mattered. And also it gave the offense a lot of help too, because it gave more opportunities for the offense to go down the field and score points. And so when the Lions defense, despite their injuries, had this offense being able to deliver and put points on the board, getting off the field was so much more important, and they were able to deliver in that spot, which is fantastic. And there's a reason why I wanted to highlight it, because despite everything that happened, they were able to step up when it mattered most, which who cares how bad your defense is, right? Whether it's injuries or you have a hole here, hole there, it doesn't matter. If you get off the field on third down, the best in the NFL, you are going to win a lot of football games. Straight up, plain and simple. All that being said, there is an elephant in the room that we have to acknowledge with this team. The playoff meltdown was one of the saddest things I think I've ever seen in a long time in the NFL. I mean, kind of like how in the NFC Championship you could see their anger. All you saw was just pure sadness. And then you see Dan Campbell upset, pushed to tears in the post-game presser. And it's so sad. But the thing was, the injuries on this defense caught up with them. They simply could not contain Jaden Daniels. They simply could not get any, help on the outside with their corners. I mean, Carlton Davis is a good corner, but then you have Terrion Arnold, who's a rookie, right? Like, the secondary was probably the biggest issue on this team, which is saying a lot because their defense or the secondary was still a pretty decent unit with everything, with all of it being said and done. But along with the injuries on defense, Jared Goff turning the ball over did not help them at all. And had Jared Goff not made the mistakes that he made in that game against Washington, they would have won that game. I genuinely believe that. And one of the things I mentioned in the preview video for the Lions and Commanders, or the divisional round preview, when I talked about this game, the thing was, this team, the Lions, if they need to get into a shootout, they will get into a shootout and probably win it. And as long as you play clean football, you can win this game. But Jared Goff simply didn't. And so many people were upset at him. So many people were saying mean things. And it's like, yeah, you had a bad game. And really was one of probably the worst day to have a bad game, quite frankly. But, I mean, the one bad game should not undo all the great that Jared Goff did for this Lions team. Had he not made those mistakes, or had the defense stayed healthy, one of those two things would have not happening would have made the Lions win this game. It was literally just two factors that just completely ruined everything for the Lions in that game. But the other thing too with this was the year that they had many coaches left, and the guys that made this team so great are off to do bigger and better things. Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn have become head coaches. Guys like Antoine Randall and Terrell Williams, their defensive line coach, and you look at some of these other guys, have left to take on bigger roles in other organizations. So you look at what the Lions did to fill in those spots. I thought they did a fantastic job on paper, but it's going to, on the field is different from on paper. We have to see it actually translate. So it's going to be interesting to see how they build off of this year, because the 2024 Detroit Lions, I think in my opinion, was the greatest Lions team ever assembled, from top to bottom, from coaches to players, from front office. This was the greatest Detroit Lions team we have ever seen in the history of their franchise. Straight up. And we may never see a Lions team this good again. It's so hard. It is so hard to top. It would be so hard to top this, because 15 wins is already hard to reach. But with the loss of all their coaches, right, it's gonna be a very challenging year. I still expect this team to be a playoff team, right? You have, coach of the year. There's a bunch of injuries, right? Those things, coach of the year. What am I reading? Oh, I completely missed that. But anyways, I still expect this team in the playoffs. But continuing, you look at teams that have made the playoffs, right? You look at the Cleveland Browns and a couple of years ago. Then you look at the 2021 Tennessee Titans, right? Guys where the head coach was a coach of the year candidate, if not one. Well, Kevin O'Connell won it, but in my opinion, Dan Campbell should have won coach of the year. So that argument is there. But all these three teams had a bunch of injuries, and afterward, they just could not rebound. And now the Titans and the Browns have the first and second overall picks in the draft. And Detroit, I don't want that to happen to Detroit. I really don't. I don't think it will, because their roster is simply a lot better than those two teams, even at the time. But the coaching, it needs to go well. The new coaching staff that they've built here with all these guys leaving, it needs to hit. It really needs to hit and be successful, and I'm confident that it will. I love the guys that they brought in. I like that they hired Kelvin Shepard as defensive coordinator, hiring from within to keep that same standard, that same coaching style like Aaron Glenn did. And then to go on the outside to bring in for an offensive coordinator, I think was a good idea, because Ben Johnson is unique, and you hire a guy from within, you're going to probably try and replicate what he did, which is simply you cannot do. But if you bring in a guy and you look at, I can't remember his name, but he was the passing game coordinator for the Denver Broncos, and you look at what they were able to do with Bo Nix there, and the lack of talent that was really there at the receiver position outside of Cortland Sutton and Marvin Mims to a certain degree. He's going into a situation with the best group of skill position players in the NFL, straight up. So I expect this offense to continue to be good. I still expect it to be a top 10 offense. I don't think it's going to slow down very much. And as we continue, how do we actually get better here? Where can the Lions actually build to continue success to continue their continued success, right? Yeah, something like that. But anyway, you might need to find a replacement on the offensive line for Kevin Zeitler because he is a free agent. I would probably re-sign him, but in the instance you don't, I would continue to maybe sign like a free agent guard and then maybe draft one in the first or second round, right? Maybe second, right? You've got the 28th or 29th overall pick, or no, 27th or 26th maybe. I can't remember what their exact pick is, but offensive line could be a second round pick. Honestly, I think edge rusher is a bigger need. Maybe defensive tackle. In my opinion, the more I think about it, you either got to go defensive tackle or edge rusher in round one. And I know that you drafted Aiden Hutchinson, but you look at guys like a James Pierce Jr., you look at guys like a Mike Green out of Marshall, and if you could have one of those guys that's insanely talented, pair them with Aiden Hutchinson, and then you revamp the interior of this defensive line, maybe you draft a defensive tackle at the end of round two, right? You could get a revamped, younger defensive line with a ton of talent, and barring that they stay healthy, right? If they're younger, that usually means that they'll stay healthier, you would think. So you can have a situation here where one of the biggest issues of the team gets a lot better. Wait. Oh, there it is. There it goes. I thought I lost it and it came back. But building this defensive line up is going to be so important for them going into next year. And along with that, secondary will need help as well. Carlton Davis, I think, is going to be a free agent, and you have Terrion Arnold and Anis Rackstraw, who are going to be your starting corners next year, I would assume. But honestly, I would try and add more depth there. I would expect them to draft a guy on day 3. I would probably expect them to bring in another veteran corner to help help develop and be a mentor for Arnold and Rackstraw, and also play at a high level and be a solid starter. And the thing was, a lot of the secondary, they suffered because the Lions could not get a decent pass rush. So if the Lions' defensive line gets better, I would expect the secondary to make a jump with them. And with a year of development in the books for these two young corners, I think that's a real possibility for them. The big question for me, though, for the Lions is, do you draft a quarterback? Obviously, you're not going to draft one in the first round. But if there's a guy at the end of the second or the end of the third that you like, or you maybe trade up a few spots to get one, right? There's a couple quarterbacks that would be interesting to see. Number one, it would be really interesting to me if the Lions drafted Jalen Milroe, the quarterback out of Alabama. Now, before people say, oh, Jalen Milroe's trash, he's not the good of a quarterback, and I would tell you, yeah, he's not a very good prospect right now. But at the same time, for a quarterback like Jalen Milroe to succeed, he's got to go to the right organization. And you look at what the Lions have been able to do with their team, right? And building up players and giving them the coaching and development that they need to get the absolute best out of them. The Detroit Lions is one of the best places Jalen Milroe can go to. And if you want to look at, okay, Jared Goff, he's a veteran quarterback. He's probably not going to get you to a Super Bowl, but he's going to, win you a ton of games, keep you competitive. And with him playing that way, it allows Jalen Milroe to sit and learn and get that true development and work that he needs. So by the time he's ready to go at his best, you can get Jalen Milroe, a guy with a great arm, great running ability, and would add another element to this offense that could make them even better down the road, which would be a crazy thought to think about. But at the same time, I could see it because, you drafting Jalen Milroe means that you don't ultimately believe in Jared Goff, or you don't want to impact Jared Goff's confidence by drafting a guy, and then all of a sudden he might play bad, or you might get hasty and get rid of him and force Jalen Milroe to start before he's ready, right? Like, Jalen Milroe, in a way, reminds me a lot of Malik Willis coming out when he came out of Liberty, where, very, very talented prospect, but was a project and needed a lot of work and he will need time to sit and learn. Truly sit and learn. Like, I think Jalen Milroe needs to sit for 2 years minimum. I genuinely believe that. And if he can get the right coaching and the right development that he needs to succeed at the next level, the Detroit Lions, I think, can give that to him. And he's one of those teams where he will, if he goes there, I believe that he could turn into a very good quarterback. So, do you draft a quarterback? I don't think they will, honestly. But if they trade up or stick and pick at the end of the second round, if he's still there and you get Milroe, I honestly would be on board of it. I would get it. I would understand it. But I ultimately don't think that's going to happen. But this Lions team, if they can just fix this defense and build on their defensive line and add to the secondary and fill in the hole that Kevin Zeitler is probably going to leave at right guard, I think this Lions team could go right back, can be right back in the mix. They're going to be a playoff team next year, regardless, in my opinion. But if they make the right moves to fix the holes on this defense, man, and Kelvin Shepherd is able to get the most out of it, this Lions team could go from a disappointment, a heartbreaking, disappointing loss, to being a true Super Bowl contender. There is a real scenario here where Detroit, okay, they may fall off a little bit, sure, but there's also a scenario here that you have to acknowledge that this team could still find a way to get better. Even if their offense doesn't perform as well as they did this year, which I don't expect, I still expect them to be a top 10, top 5 unit, right, at bare minimum. And maybe this defense gets a little bit more production. They get better on that side of the ball. Boom, you have a more complete football team that's actually pretty well, honestly, could be more well suited to compete for a Super Bowl compared to 2024, right? So there's a scenario where that could happen as well. But for right now, the Detroit Lions have a lot of work to do. They have some moves they need to make in order to get better. And if they make the right moves along with the right coach and they prove that they got the right coaches, they moved on and got the right coaches, this team will be in the mix once again. And that is going to do it for me today, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it to this point, make sure you guys let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, whether you agree with me, disagree with me, or if you just want to say hi, I will say hi to you right back. And also, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button. Pushing those 2 buttons helps the channel out tremendously. Only takes a couple of seconds, and it helps me grow this platform and continue to share my football passion with more and more people. So I would greatly appreciate it if you guys could hit those buttons for me. And also make sure you guys share the video, whether you're sharing it on social media or spreading by word of mouth, getting everybody you know and love locked in and locked on to the Shumake Tank podcast, coming out with great content for you guys every single week. That is going to do it for me today, guys. The NFC North is now completed. On to the NFC South. And I will see you all next time.